Hi folks, welcome again to another episode of Pro Football in the 1970s. I'm your host Joe Zagorski. Now, thanks to the Sports History Network, a signed copy of my new book, The 2003-Yard Odyssey, The Juice, The Electric Company, and an Epic Run for a Record will be given away to one lucky fan. It's all about the 1973 Buffalo Bills. Please check out the Sports History Network online for details on how you can win a free copy of my new book on the 1973 Buffalo Bills. Thanks a lot for listening in to today's episode, folks. Look forward to chatting with you again soon in the future. Take care.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hi, folks. Welcome again to another episode of Pro Football in the 1970s. I'm your host, Joe Zagorski, and in today's episode, we'll be remembering two great NFL playoff games of the 1970s. Now, there were a couple of very competitive playoff games in the NFL during the 1970s, and many people have largely forgotten them if they really paid much attention to them at all. One occurred in 1973, and the other took place in 1975. Let's tackle that 1973 playoff game first. On December 22, 1973, the 10-4 Washington Redskins traveled to Metropolitan Stadium in Bloomington, Minnesota to take on the 12-2 Minnesota Vikings in the NFC Divisional Playoffs. Washington came into this contest with a very strong defense, particularly their pass rush. The Redskins registered a league-leading 53 quarterback sacks in 1973. The Vikings were the favored team going into this game, mostly because they had dominated teams during the regular season. But the playoffs are a different animal altogether. Washington managed to take a 7-3 lead over Minnesota by the time that halftime rolled around. The Vikings made their share of mistakes during the first two quarters of that playoff game. In their locker room at halftime, Minnesota All-Pro defensive end Carl Eller had had enough of it. He launched into a tirade directed at all of his teammates. He threw his helmet. He kicked some chairs. Then, legend has it, he had put his fist all the way through a blackboard. Eller's teammate, quarterback Fran Tarkenton, would later say that he felt like crawling into his locker and hiding in the midst of watching Eller destroy a blackboard, a defenseless blackboard, might I add, in the locker room at halftime. The rest of the Vikings got the message. Minnesota responded in the second half with 24 points, thanks to a pair of touchdown passes from Fran Tarkenton to wide receiver John Gilliam. The Vikings defense could not keep the Redskins from scoring again in the second half, however, but they only permitted 13 more points from Washington, and Minnesota held on to a clutch 27-20 victory and a ticket to the 1973 NFC Championship game. When discussing his verbal and physical halftime outburst, Carl Eller was a little less hyped up in the post-game interviews. He said that it's not good practice for a player to do that. It's the coach's place to talk in the locker room and no one else. But there were some things that needed to be said. There were also no visible outbursts a couple of years later in the 1975 AFC Divisional Playoff game between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Oakland Raiders. But like the Redskins-Vikings playoff game in 1973, this Bengals-Raiders matchup showcased a highly competitive meeting between two very strong teams. Both teams came into the contest at the Oakland Coliseum sporting impressive 11-3 records. But for the first three quarters, Oakland appeared to have strong control of this playoff meeting with Cincinnati. The Raiders owned a 24-14 lead going into the fourth quarter. Oakland also had a strong edge in virtually every statistical category. Oakland quarterback Kenny Stabler would go on to complete 17 of his 23 passing attempts, worth 199 yards and 3 touchdowns. Practically everyone felt that this game was over heading into the fourth quarter. But they were wrong. The Raiders committed enough mistakes and turnovers in the fourth quarter to spur a Bengals comeback. Cincinnati responded in the final frame with 2 clutch scoring drives, resulting in a pair of touchdowns. Bengals quarterback Ken Anderson threw a pair of fourth-quarter touchdown passes, one to Charlie Joyner and the other to Isaac Curtis. Before you knew it, Cincinnati was just 3 points behind Oakland. The Raiders managed to hold on to the ball the rest of the way, however, as they preserved a tough 31-28 victory. The game proved how important it was, and still is, to play a full 60 minutes. The Bengals came awfully close to proving that relaxing for even a moment can cost a team like Oakland a crucial win. Now for today's trivia question. Who were the leading rushers in the 1973 Redskins-Vikings playoff game and in the 1975 Bengals-Raiders playoff game? Now, if you would like to learn more about great NFL playoff games of the 1970s, be sure to check out my Facebook page, The NFL in the 1970s. And if you'd like to listen to many more other great sports podcasts from many more other great sports podcasters, check out the Sports History Network online. I promise that you won't be disappointed. Now, thanks to the Sports History Network, a signed copy of my new book, The 2003-Yard Odyssey, The Juice, The Electric Company, and An Epic Run for a Record, will be given away to one lucky fan. It's all about the 1973 Buffalo Bills. Please check out the Sports History Network online for details on how you can win a free copy of my new book on the 1973 Buffalo Bills. Thanks a lot for listening in to today's episode, folks. Look forward to chatting with you again soon in the future. Take care.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.